Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are taking a fascinating look at Stone and Dream, the mythical subversion of the Red Chamber. Now, most people know Dream of the Red Chamber as this massive, sprawling, tragic romance. But actually, scratch that. Today, we're exploring it through a completely different lens. We're going to see how the author uses ancient mythology not just as a pretty backdrop, but as a radical philosophical subversion of history itself. So get ready, because we are literally throwing out the traditional rulebook and looking at this classic masterpiece as a spectacular rebellion against reality. Okay, let's dive into this. Where does a story actually transcend history? To find out, the author plunges us straight into the great wilderness without any kind of roadmap. It's a realm of pure, primordial chaos. We're immediately forced to question the very boundary between historical fact and prehistoric myth. I mean, think about it. Before there are emperors, before there are rigid social classes and roles, there's just the vast, boundless universe. And that is exactly where our story begins. And it begins with this highly specific, highly symbolic number, 36,501. According to the foundational myth of the novel, the goddess Nuwa was tasked with forging massive stones to mend the broken sky. She forged exactly 36,501 of them, which is a number directly linked to the 365 days in a year, stretched over a century. But here is the kicker. She only used 36,500. She left exactly one stone unused. And that single discarded stone actually gained sentience. It just sat there at the foot of Chingan Peak, completely useless, filled with all this resentment and shame because it wasn't chosen to serve some grand purpose. And this brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of our entire explainer. On one side, we have history. This is a rigid cage of emperors, generals, and strictly defined utilitarian roles. Basically, you are what you do for the empire. But on the other side, we have mythology, the great wilderness. This represents ultimate individual freedom and the existence of that one unused stone. The author makes this deliberate, absolutely brilliant choice to rebel against the rigid constraints of Chinese history by rooting his main character in this free, prehistoric, completely useless realm. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly does a prehistoric rock enter the human world? Well, it becomes jade. Jade is essentially the soul of stone. Over a vast stretch of time, think the Stone Age, rough, useless, sharp rocks were handled, cut, and stained with the blood and sweat of countless human generations. So the cold stone is transformed. It's tranquilized and refined into something warm and precious. That unused cosmic stone from the myth descends into our human world as Bayu, whose name literally translates to precious jade. Let's move on and see how this builds up, because we have to map out how this mythical realm translates into the earthly one. Up in the mythical Spirit River, Bayu was a divine attendant who watered a delicate crimson pearl grass with sweet dew. Down in the mortal realm, that grass incarnates as the female lead, Dayu. This whole karmic transaction, this deep debt, is overseen by mysterious figures like the Taoist priest Kong Kong and Zen Xian. They act as the bridge between the grand cosmic myth and the dusty, everyday mortal world. Which brings us to this absolutely incredible vow from the Crimson Pearl Grass right before she incarnates. She says, if he were to be reborn as a human, I would go with him, repaying him with all the tears of my life. I mean, wow, this completely changes how we view their earthly relationship. Dayu's reincarnation into the human world wasn't about fulfilling some typical worldly romance. It wasn't about marriage or property or status. It was purely, 100%, about repaying a mythical debt of watering from a past life. Now, from a highly practical, worldly perspective, the idea of repaying a debt with literal tears is completely absurd. But you know what? That absurdity is the point. By framing their bond this way, the author totally discards all utilitarian, profit-driven relationships. He completely rejects the practical benefits that society demands of us. Instead, he elevates human life to pure self-fulfillment. It's championing an aesthetic, spiritual bond over a practical one. It's this powerful, rebellious cry against the suffocating cages of orthodox reality. And Baoyu totally embraces this rebellion. In a self-deprecating poem, he describes himself as inept at worldly affairs. He says his behavior is eccentric and perverse, and ultimately he is completely useless. While society expects a young man of his high standing to study hard, pass the civil service exams, and serve the empire, Baoyu proudly owns his inner weed-like nature. He truly is the earthly embodiment of that discarded, unuseful stone. So the crucial point is that this uselessness is actually a profound form of resistance.
Bao Yu's refusal to conform liberates him from the heavy, expected duties of family and nation. He rejects strict Confucian orthodoxy as entirely hypocritical. In a way, this really mirrors the Western decadent literary movement. Think of Baudelaire's Flowers of Evil, which completely dismantled old, hypocritical societal rules. Bao Yu's total uselessness to society isn't a flaw. It's a radical, deliberate rebellion to find true freedom.
This collision between history and myth reaches an absolute fever pitch in Chapter 5. Bao Yu is feeling drowsy and wanders into the room of Qin Caking. At first, everything's totally grounded in sensory reality. You've got a famous painting by Tengbo Hu on the wall, there's a sweet fragrance in the air, but as he drifts into a dream, that rational reality completely dissolves into a surreal battleground. And what happens next is this wild, rapid-fire, mind-bending sequence. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the text tells us that the precious mirror belonging to Empress Wu Zetian, a real historical figure from centuries prior, is just sitting there in the room. And right next to that mirror is a dancing plate belonging to Zhao Feian from the Han Dynasty, and inexplicably, it's holding a papaya associated with Yang Gaifei from the Tang Dynasty. We are jumping wildly across entire centuries of history in a single dizzying glance. And it finishes with Princess Shouchang's treasure from the Hanzong Palace. It's like history is being put into a blender. The author is deliberately taking all these distinct, heavy historical artifacts, crushing them together, and compressing them into a single, nonsensical space. He is purposefully using the surreal power of myth to conquer, overwhelm, and totally subvert human, fabricated, rational history. Time literally loses all meaning here. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens next. In this dreamscape, Bao Yu sees a mind-bending couplet on a stone archway at the Great Illusionary Transformation. It reads, "When falsehood is taken for truth, even truth becomes falsehood." This is huge. It forces us to completely reevaluate everything we've just seen. The author is pointing out that what we confidently call historical truth is often entirely fabricated. The rules of society, the grand legacies of empires, they might just be the actual falsehoods. Which leaves us with this massive foundational question. If human history is full of fabrications and arbitrary rules, can myth actually be the true prophecy of reality? I mean, pause and think about it for a second. Is the absurdity of the sentient stone in the great wilderness actually more authentic to the human soul than the rigid, fabricated social roles of emperors, generals, and bureaucrats? Deep in this land of illusion, Bao Yu opens 12 golden cabinets. Inside, he finds these cryptic poems that perfectly prophesy the tragic fates of the women in his life. It's exactly like drawing bamboo sticks in a temple to read your fortune. The destinies of these characters are entirely locked in these poetic incantations from the very beginning. Yet, tragically, Bao Yu reads them and remains completely unenlightened. He, and we the readers, just watch helplessly as the inevitable doom slowly approaches. This inevitable tragedy brings us straight to the ancient philosophy of Zhangzi. Those who dream of drinking wine, then weep. Those who dream of weeping, then sleep in the fields. This novel really represents the ultimate culmination of Chinese aesthetics regarding dreams. Life is portrayed as waking up from one dream only to find yourself hunting or weeping in yet another dream. It's just layers upon layers of illusion. So here is the ultimate illusion, the big takeaway. Life and death are just a continuous dream cycle. Reality and historical truth, they are merely mirages. But here is the true tragedy of the human condition. Even when we have the rational awareness that we are in a dream, even when we know it will probably end in tragedy, we still cling to it. We still desperately indulge in the illusion. And when the dream finally breaks, the earthly precious jade simply reverts back to what it always was, an unattached, unburdened stone in the great wilderness. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. If our so-called reality is just a fabricated cage of historical utility, and the useless mythical stone represents true unbridled freedom, are you actually awake right now? Or are you simply indulging in your very own version of the next dream? Think about that the next time you look at the rigid rules of your own world. Thanks for joining me on this shared journey, and keep questioning the illusion.